We're back in the book of Joshua. Let's see if we can cover a couple of chapters this morning. Remember, in the book of Joshua here, just a quick outline so we know where we are again. In the chapters of the book of Joshua, chapters 13 to 21, Joshua is dividing the land of Canaan. It was one of his jobs. He was to lead Israel across the Jordan River into the land. He was to conquer the kings of the land so that Israel could live in the land, and then he was to divide it among the 12 tribes of Israel. So in Joshua chapter 13, we see that 2.5 tribes, the tribes of Gad, Reuben, and half of the people of Manasseh settled on the east side, the wrong side, I would say, of the Jordan River. But nonetheless, in Joshua 13, he confirms that. He goes over that history about the 2.5 tribes and how Moses gave them their land on the east side. And in chapters 14 through 19, the 9.5 tribes that remain receive their inheritance and their land borders within the land of Canaan on the west side of the Jordan River. In chapter 20, hopefully we'll get there next week, we'll talk about cities of refuge. God sets up certain cities within Israel in the land of Canaan where criminals can go to be held safely before their trial. That was the cities of refuge. In chapter 21, we'll see the Levites' cities. We'll go over that very, very quickly. But the Levites, the tribe of Levi, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, the third son of Leah, the tribe of Levites, they don't get an inheritance in the land as far as a piece of land that's theirs. The Levites are spread throughout all of Israel. They're the priests, they're the teachers of Israel, and God would send them throughout all the territories of the tribes. They don't have their own tribe. Their inheritance, God says over and over, is Himself. God is their inheritance. They will be His mediators, His priests between Himself and His people Israel. So they have a very, very special place in God's plan for Israel, but they do get cities and pasture lands for them to live in. In the last chapters of Joshua 22 to 24, we see the last days of Joshua. In chapter 22, the conquests are over. All the territories, all the people have gotten their lands, and the 2.5 tribes, Gad, Reuben, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, go back. They cross the Jordan River again. They go back to the east side of the Jordan River where they're reunited with their wives and their families. And they build an altar at the border that we'll talk about, a disputed altar that almost leads Israel into civil war. They've been in the land a very short amount of time, 7 years, and they're almost thrust into civil war. And in the last 2 chapters, we see Joshua's last days. In Joshua 23 and 24, this is where in 24 he utters this famous statement that you see on refrigerators and bumper stickers all the time. As for me and my house, we will serve Yahweh. The distinction being we won't serve any of the pagan gods of the land. We won't serve any of the false gods. Joshua says, Israel, all of you have a choice. But as for me, Joshua, and my house, the family of Joshua, we serve Yahweh only. Very brave man, this Joshua. So in Joshua chapter 15, we've already seen it. I just want to wrap your arms around it so we can drop back into it. In Joshua chapter 15, the lot for the sons of Judah is cast. So Judah gets their inheritance. You move to Joshua chapter 16, and we've been talking about the sons of Joseph. Remember, we talked about the fact that Joseph got a double portion. He was treated as the firstborn son in place of Reuben, and Joshua would get the double portion. Joseph, excuse me. And that's why when we look at that map of the apportionment of the tribes, you don't see the name of Joseph on it, but you see 2 representatives of Joseph. You see his sons. Wrong map, but you see his sons Manasseh and Ephraim both receiving an inheritance. So in Joshua chapter 15, Judah gets their land. In Joshua chapter 16, Joseph gets his land. It's passed out between his two sons, the double inheritance, his sons Manasseh and Ephraim. In Joshua chapter 17, we saw that Manasseh got their land, and we closed last time with the idea of the daughters of Zelophehad. Remember, Zelophehad had 5 daughters. He had no sons, and the daughters wanted a piece of land in their father's name. So finally here in Joshua 17, the daughters get the land that God promised them through Moses a few years earlier. So the 2.5 tribes, just to bring you up to date, 2.5 tribes of the 12 are settled. Here's the Jordan River right here. It flows out of the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea, and 2.5 tribes are settled on the right side, the east side of the Jordan River. Joshua sent the people across the Jordan River to the west into the land of Canaan. This is all on the west side of the river, the land of Canaan. This is the promised land. This is the land that God promised Abraham that he would give Israel forever. Joshua led the people Israel across the Jordan River, and that's what we're in right now. They have fought the battles. There are still a lot of people that need to be destroyed in the land of Canaan, but the power structure, the kings of the area have been defeated. There's no one strong enough in the land of Canaan to kick Israel out. So Israel is in the land, and Joshua is giving the land to each of the 9.5 tribes that remain that don't have land. So far, the only tribes that have been settled in the land of Canaan are Judah and Joseph. Joseph with his 2 sons representative, Manasseh and Ephraim. That's it. So there are still 7 tribes that haven't received their land yet, and that's where we are going to pick up here in just a minute. But it's interesting to me, listen to this, only 2 tribes, only Joseph and Judah have received land in the land of Canaan so far, and there's already a fight. They're already going to bring a complaint to God. Yahweh, we don't like the way you're dividing up the land. What did they complain about when they left Egypt? Yahweh, we don't like this food. Yahweh, we don't have any water. It was complaint after complaint with Israel. Only 2 tribes of the 9.5 that remain have received their land in Canaan, and already in Joshua chapter 17, the complaints begin. Moses had a complaint department. It was him, unfortunately, him alone, and now Joshua is going to hear complaints from the sons of Joseph. Let's pick up in verse 14 of Joshua chapter, are we in chapter 18? No, we're in chapter 17. 17 verse 14, look what it says. The sons of Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim, start the complaining. We don't have a big enough piece of land. In verse 14, then the sons of Joseph, remember that's Manasseh and Ephraim, the sons of Joseph spoke to Joshua and they said, can you imagine being Joshua, having fought 7 years of battle, conquest, leading Israel, apportioning out the land with Eleazar the priest, with the Urim and the Thummim, casting lots as Yahweh says, this is the tribe that will go first, Judah, and he gives them a land. Now the second tribe that will go is Joseph, and he separates the land from Ephraim and Manasseh, and all of a sudden they stand up and say, that's not the land we want. Not big enough. Wow. What did they say? Why have you given me only 1 lot and 1 portion for an inheritance, since I am a numerous people whom the Lord has thus far blessed? Now, if you read that slowly, you catch the irony. Let's read it again. This is what the sons of Joseph say to Joshua about what Yahweh God, the Lord, has given them as an inheritance. This wasn't Joshua's idea. It wasn't Joshua's final decision. It was Yahweh with the Urim and the Thummim and the priest's pouch. It was Yahweh determining who got what land. And listen again, now that I make that statement, why have you given me only one lot and one portion for an inheritance? Who gave them one lot and one portion as an inheritance? Whose decision was that? It was God's. It was God's. And what do they say? Since I am a numerous people whom Yahweh God has thus far blessed. So you're saying that Yahweh has thus far blessed you, but all of a sudden you're saying Yahweh has not blessed me thus far enough. I want more. Already there's this self-focus on their group. Look what it says in verse 15. Joshua said to them, look what Joshua does, the leader of the people, knowing that God is in control of the apportioning of the land. Look how Joshua, the great leaders can learn from Joshua how to lead a people. The bottom line in what Joshua does is he doesn't give an inch. An inch. He doesn't go 1 inch beyond God's plan. He doesn't apportion the land any differently than God did. He didn't say, yes, you're right, God did this wrong. Let me give you more land. That's not what Joshua does. He says, if you are a numerous people like you say you are, go up to the forest and clear a place for yourself. There in the land of the Perizzites and of the Rephaim. Joshua knows exactly who's in the land. Let me give you one fact about the Rephaim. They're giants. They're giants. So Joshua says, if you have too many people and the land that you have you think is not big enough, go into the forest, which is also part of the land you have, and clear a place for yourself. In the land of the Perizzites and the Rephaim, since the hill country of Ephraim is too narrow for you. So the fact is that Ephraim and Manasseh wanted the easy land. They wanted the land that was easily inhabitable in their territory that God had given them. What they didn't want was to go to war against the Perizzites and the Rephaim, the giants. They didn't want to fight for the land. Remember, I've been telling you all along that Joshua, with the armies of Israel, with one united army of Israel, they cut the head off of the snake. They defeated the kings of the land of Canaan, so much so that Israel could take over the land and not be kicked out, not be defeated. But there were many peoples that each tribe had to go in and defeat. There were many more people left that needed to be killed. Many more false god worshiping Canaanites. And in this portion of the land were the Perizzites and the Rephaim, and the children of Joseph were expected to go in there, continue the warfare, and clear them out of the land. But they didn't want to do it. They didn't mind taking the easy land, but they didn't want to go into the forest and fight a battle with these people. And what does Joshua say? But go into the land that I've given you, that God showed me and Eliezer to give you, and fight. Take the land and work it. Work the land, tend the earth, clear the forest. I know there are forests there. I know the land that God gave you. Clear the forests and live in the land. They weren't willing to do the work. So Joshua keeps telling them, the land that I've given you is enough land. The land that God has given you is enough land, but it's going to take courage and it's going to take faith in God to defeat the people of the land. So the sons of Joseph are tried. Ephraim and Manasseh are given these trials by God of a forested land that needs to be cleared and of a land with giants in it. And their response is that we can't do anything here. We're afraid of the giants and we're afraid of the forest. We're afraid to do hard work, it seems. And Joshua's response is, God knows what He's doing. Go do what you're called to do. Keep reading. Oh, let me ask another question before we keep going. So in God's eyes, This is a very interesting verse for people that hug trees and say that we have to maintain the forests and the earth at all costs. It's interesting that God tells Joshua, and Joshua tells the people, clear the forest. Clear it out. Cut down the trees. Tend the earth for the uses of man. So the question is, are we called to preserve every forest on earth at all costs, or are we instead called to use this earth wisely for man's needs? What's the answer? We're to use this earth wisely for man's needs. And Joshua says to them, cut down the forest. Use the land. Use the wood. Verse 16, so the sons of Joseph said, because every time a Jew is given a solution, the Jew accepts the solution and says, you are right, God is right, we will succumb and we will obey. No, that's not what the Jews do here. It's not what the good sons of Joseph do. Look what they say. They've got to fight. In verse 16, the sons of Joseph reply, the hill country is not enough. Joshua just told him, I know it's not enough, so go clear out the forested areas of the hill country. They say the hill country is not enough for us, and all the Canaanites, who do they sound like here? All the Canaanites who live in the valley land have chariots of iron. They're too strong for us. But both those who are in Beit Shan and in its towns, and those who are in the valley of Jezreel, who do they sound like? They sound like those 10 spies 47 years earlier who were too afraid to take the land because of the giants that lived in the land and the fortified cities. That's exactly what they just said. The people are too strong, their armies are too strong, they have chariots of iron, and their cities are too strong. Beit Shan and all of its towns. We can't do it. Who are they saying can't do it ultimately? God can't do it. Same thing, different day. Same story, different day. Verse 17, Joshua spoke. And so now the good leader of Israel is certainly, after 2 complaints, going to say, okay, I give you right. I'll give you some more land. No, Joshua doesn't give an inch. Because he's on God's side. That's all. That's the only reason why. He's not a stubborn leader. He's a leader that knows God has given you this land. Go take your land. Quit complaining to me. So Joshua spoke to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, and he said, you are a numerous people. Remember earlier in verse 15, he said, if you are a numerous people. Now he agrees with them. He knows it. He says, you're a numerous people, and you have great power. Why are you afraid? You shall not have one lot only. In verse 18, this is what he means by that. The hill country shall be yours, for though it is a forest, part of the hill country was cleared and lived in, like Beit Shan and all its towns, and part of the hill country was forested. And so he tells them again, go clear the forest. He says, the hill country shall be yours, for though it is a forest, you shall clear it. And to its farthest borders it shall be yours. You haven't taken all of your territory yet. Go clear the forest. Go kill the Rephaim. Go kill the Perizzites and take the land that God has given you. No complaining. Go do your job. God is on your side. He's made you a strong and numerous people. So you shall clear it its farthest borders, it shall be yours, for you shall drive out the Canaanites. If you have faith that Yahweh will lead you in these battles, then Yahweh will allow you to drive out the Canaanites. Even though they have chariots of iron and they are very strong. So have no fear. The men of Joseph's tribe had to have faith in Yahweh's ability to drive out the nations before them. Up to this moment, they had no faith in Yahweh's ability to drive out the people before them. Not only that, but they had to be willing to do the hard work of chopping down the trees, these old growth, massive trees in the forest. Go clear the land. They had to make the land inhabitable. So interesting that each tribe had responsibilities. It just all wasn't easy. God just didn't lay everything out at their feet and say, go in and do no work. That wasn't what it was. They had responsibilities. They had to have courage. They had to go in and fight people. They had to defeat people in battle as small tribal armies. And they had to be willing to do the work to make the land inhabitable. And so in verse 18, we totally shift gears. And in the midst, just to throw some context on this, in the midst of the complaining of Israel, yet again, the complaints have shown up. God refocuses on Israel, on himself, on the tabernacle, on the worship of Yahweh. And in Joshua chapter 18, God moves in a very definite way, and he takes the tabernacle and he moves it to a new home. Look what it says in Joshua 18, verse 1. It says, then the whole congregation of the sons of Israel assembled themselves at Shiloh. A good Southern American might call this town Shiloh, but a Hebrew would call it Shiloh. Shiloh. So the congregation of the sons of Israel have come out of wherever they were living, Gilgal at the time, and they assembled themselves at Shiloh, and they set up the tent of meeting there. Remember what the tent of meeting is? Here is Shiloh on a map. And notice where it is, even on the screen. You couldn't get any more in the middle of Israel. It's central to the nation, to the land of Canaan. It's central to Israel. Jerusalem, modern Jerusalem, is only about 10 miles from there, 15 miles. It's right in this area right here. But the tabernacle, remember what the tabernacle was. It was this tent of meeting. It was this tent that in the book of Exodus, God gave Moses the directions, the blueprints, if you will, to build the worship center, the place where Israel was to worship, the place where the Levitical priests would come before God and man, between God and man, to worship God on man's behalf, to bring word to man on God's behalf. It was the tabernacle. And it was inside this tabernacle, in the back of the tabernacle, in the last 1/3 section of the rear of the tabernacle, where there would be a curtain set up that only the high priest could go behind, because there would sit the altar, the Ark of the Covenant. And it was on top of this ark where you see those two angels with these cherubim with their wings touching each other. It's in the middle there on the mercy seat where the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud would actually descend onto that mercy seat. You can see it in that blue color lifting up. That's where God would choose to dwell among men. This was the holiest little piece of real estate on all the earth above the Ark of the Covenant and the mercy seat. And so God is telling Israel, listen, let's stop what we're doing here. Amidst all this complaining, it's time to move the tabernacle. It's time to set the tabernacle up again in a more permanent location. It would be here for a while. It's time for you to realize that I, the God of heaven, Creator God, dwell among you. Why all this complaining? Why all this lack of unity? Why are you backbiting each other? Why, just like Dathan and Abiram and even Aaron and Miriam tried to take the power and the authority away from Moses, why are you fighting against my man Joshua? What is going on down here? Infighting in Israel. So God moves the tent of meeting to refocus people on worship of Him. So the tabernacle, this center of Jewish worship, is set up in Shiloh, among other things, to remind the Jews that to remain in the land of Canaan, they would have to be obedient. They would have to serve and worship Yahweh alone. And already the sons of Joseph are saying, Yahweh messed up. Our land is not enough. You've given us too small a portion. We're a numerous people. We can't defeat the Perizzites and the Rephaim. We can't defeat Beit Shan and its towns, its fortified cities. And immediately God has to go in there and settle the issue by speaking of His tabernacle and His presence among Israel. So the tabernacle in Shiloh would help to unify the country. It would help to unify the Jews and focus them on worshiping Yahweh instead of their self-interests. The land is not enough. Our portion is not big enough. What are we going to do with this forested land? How are we going to defeat all these powerful people? He had to get them out of their self-absorbed thinking back into understanding who they were, the 12 tribes of God, the tribes of Israel, the chosen people of God. Verse 2 says, there remained among the sons of Israel 7 tribes who had not divided their inheritance. That's all we get about the tabernacle, but I just don't want you to miss that one verse and how important it was that Israel refocus on Yahweh and stop complaining and understand that He's in charge of all these things. So there remained among the sons of Israel 7 tribes who had not divided their inheritance. Apparently there was some activity, some responsibility each of the tribes had to take care of to get their allotted piece of land. We're not told why they delay. We're told that they do delay. There were 7 tribes who had not divided their inheritance. We're also not told how long this delay is. But in Joshua chapter 18 verse 2, we get back into this, and Joshua says, listen, there's 7 more tribes that need a territory. And he comes up with a new plan. Look what it says in verse 3. So Joshua said to the sons of Israel, how long will you put off entering to take possession of the land which Yahweh, the God of your fathers, has given you? Why aren't you dividing up the land and taking it as you should? Like I said, apparently there was a responsibility that the tribes had to come to Joshua and get this done. So Joshua comes up with a new plan to break Israel's complacency, and he sends out surveyors. Look what it says. Verse 4, he says, provide for yourselves 3 men from each tribe, each of these remaining 7 tribes. Bring 3 men from each of the tribes, that I may send them, that they may arise and walk through the land and write a description of it. So they're surveyors. They're going out to look for creeks, for mountains, for ridges, for border lines, for natural borders to these lands. That's what he's sending them out to do. Write a description of it according to their inheritance, then they shall return to me. In verse 5 he says, they shall divide it into 7 portions. So go into the land, divide it 7 ways, and come back to me, and I'll decide through the Urim and the Thummim and the priest Eleazar, I'll decide who gets which of the 7 pieces of land you've divided out. Divided into 7 portions, Judah will stay in her territory on the south. He's already given Judah her land. And the house of Joseph shall stay in their territory on the north. Manasseh and Ephraim will maintain their land. In verse 6, he says, you shall describe the land in 7 divisions. So break it up. You're the ones that are going to go into the land. Divide it up into 7 pieces. Bring me each of the 7 pieces descriptions. And we'll go to Yahweh and see who gets what. I'll cast lots before you here, before Yahweh our God. One more time about this casting of lots. I want to show you a verse quickly and we move on. Look what it says in Ezra chapter 2 verse 63. Now Ezra chapter 2 fast forwards Israel's future almost 1,000 years. We go all the way into 500 BC or so. From 1400 BC all the way to 500 BC, Israel has been kicked out of the land. They've already been in Babylon for 70 years. They've come back into the land under Ezra, Nehemiah, Zerubbabel. And this is what happens in the book of Ezra. As they're trying to decide who the proper priests are, there's one family that can't find their lineage. They've lost their paperwork. They don't have their birth certificate. They can't show that they're the son of this guy who begot this guy, who begot this guy, who begot this guy. They can't show that they are Levites. And so this is what the governor says that they should do. The governor said to them that they should not eat from the most holy things. So don't live as if you're a Levite yet. Don't eat the Levitical food yet. We need to make a determination whether you're really in the family of Levi. So don't eat from the most holy things until this occurs. And how do they make the decision? They go to God. How does God make the decision for these priests? Until a priest stood up with Urim and Thummim. This is the way that Yahweh would make decisions, would show His decisions for Israel. A priest would stand up with the Urim and Thummim. Now look at this picture again. Remember I told you that this white breastplate has 12 stones on it, each stone representing one of the tribes of Israel. And it's folded over in half so that it makes a pouch. And inside that pouch, we know that inside that pouch are these two things called Urim and Thummim. And we also know that it's through the Urim and Thummim that God would show Israel, yes or no, He would show them what to do. This was how they cast lots, with this Urim and Thummim. So the priest was involved in it. And that's why in this chapter with Joshua, Eleazar is with him. Eleazar is deciding through the Urim and Thummim, just like in Ezra chapter 2, which tribe gets which land. That's how God is doing it. Now let me ask you a question. Could God have vocally told Joshua, Judah gets this land, from the river to the sea to this mountain to this, and could God have then spoken again to Joshua and say, now Manasseh will get this land? And could Yahweh have spoken to Joshua again and said, now to the tribes of Gad, Reuben, all the tribes, Dan, Asher, Naphtali, could God have verbally spoken? Could God have given him a map of the land and defined each of the 12 tribes' territories like you see right here? Could God have done that? Yes. How did God choose to do it? Through the priests, through the Urim and Thummim that they had in his breastplate, through the casting of lots. That's how God decided to do it, and that's why the land is cut up the way it is. It's because God showed through the priest how it would be done. He could do it one of 1,000 different ways. This is the way He chose to show Israel His decisions. Through the casting of lots, this Urim and Thummim. Now that's as deep as I can get. I don't know exactly how they cast lots. I don't know if those stones, I don't know what they did. I don't even want to speculate because we don't know. But we know, just like Ezra said, the priest and his Urim and Thummim make decisions for Israel. So we'll go to the priest and let him cast lots and determine things. And that's what's going on here. So Joshua, get back into context, Joshua sends 3 men from each tribe into the territory, into this northern land, to figure out who will get what. He says, bring me back 7 divisions. I will go to Eleazar the priest, and he will cast lots through the Urim and Thummim and determine who gets what. That's what's going on here. So verse 7, for the Levites have no portion. He mentions the Levites again, so we don't need 8 pieces of land, only 7. The Levites have no portion among you because the priesthood of the Lord is their inheritance. And then he mentions Gad and Reuben. Well, what about the other tribes? Why do we only need 7 pieces? So he gives this history of Gad and Reuben. He says, Gad and Reuben and the half tribe of Manasseh also have received their inheritance eastward beyond the Jordan. You can see it here. We talked about it earlier. Half of Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben are on the east side of the river. It's just given reasons why he only needs 7 pieces of land. Verse 8, the men arose and they went. Joshua commanded those who went to describe the land. This is what he said. He said, "Go and walk through the land and describe it and return to me, and then I will cast lots for you here before the Lord in Shiloh." So it's Yahweh who makes the decision. Yahweh, through the priest, is going to make the decision of which tribe gets which land. So the men went, passed throughout the land. They described it by cities and 7 divisions in a book. They had a surveyor's book. They had a ledger. They had some sort of document. Wouldn't you love to see this document? The earliest surveyors we know beside Noah and his 3 sons. So they come back with a document, and they came to Joshua at the camp at Shiloh, and Joshua cast lots through Eleazar the priest. Joshua cast lots for them in Shiloh before Yahweh, and there Joshua divided the land to the sons of Israel according to their divisions. And now for the rest of chapter 18, from verse 10 forward, for the rest of chapter 18 and all of chapter 19, what we see is each of the 7 tribes that remain, they get their territory. Verse 11 starts it. It says, now the lot of the tribe of the sons of Benjamin came up. So Eleazar cast the lot, the Urim and the Thummim. Yahweh shows through the Urim and the Thummim that Benjamin goes first. So the lot of the tribes of Benjamin came up according to their families. The territory of their lot lay between the sons of Judah and the sons of Joseph. So look at the map here. You see Benjamin right there in the middle. I circled it in red. Between the sons of Judah. Just like it says, their lot between the sons of Judah. Oh, where does it say it? And the sons of Joseph. Ephraim and Manasseh are the sons of Joseph. So there's Benjamin's lot. Look at what it says in verse 20. Drop down to verse 20 with me. We got to go through this quickly. I'm not interested in the cities and the creeks and all the boundary lines. All I'm interested in is that Benjamin gets her land. In verse 20 it says, moreover, the Jordan was its border on the east side. This was the inheritance of the sons of Benjamin. So the tribe of Benjamin gets their land in the land of Canaan. In verse 28, I just want you to circle a word, Jerusalem. The holy city Jerusalem is within the tribe of Benjamin. The holy city Jerusalem is right on the border. You can see it right here. It's right on the border between Judah and Benjamin. But the bulk of the city, all the way to the Kidron Valley, belonged to the tribe of Benjamin. The holiest place on earth, very interesting. The place where God would choose to dwell eternally lies within the territory of the son Benjamin. And then quickly, Joshua chapter 19, let's just look at the highlights. The second lot, I'm only showing you that all of the 12 tribes of Jacob, all of the 12 sons of Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel, they each are named and they each get their land. There's nobody that's lost in Israel. There are no lost tribes of Israel. They're all well represented. Joshua chapter 19, the second lot that Eleazar the priest determined through the Urim and the Thummim, that Yahweh showed the priest what tribe goes next. That tribe is Simeon. To the tribes of the sons of Simeon, according to their families, their inheritance was in the midst of the inheritance of the sons of Judah. Now, we're going to have to talk about Simeon and then shut down, unfortunately. But look at Simeon. Everybody else on the map has their own territory, their own border, but Simeon was different. If you'll notice, Judah, this mustardy orange, this orange color engulfs the territory of Simeon. Simeon is within the tribe of Judah. Judah borders them all the way around. And that's a very interesting statement, because the tribe of Judah would lose their inherited land. The tribe of Simeon would lose their inherited land. Look at what it says in verse 9. I want to talk about this for a couple of minutes and then we're going to close. The tribe of Simeon is different. It says, the inheritance of the sons of Simeon was taken from the portion of the sons of Judah, for the share of the sons of Judah was too large for them. As if God had made a mistake. They say God gave Judah too much land, so Simeon took a land within Judah. I don't believe that at all. God knew exactly what He was doing, but keep reading. So the sons of Simeon received an inheritance in the midst, or in the middle, within Judah's inheritance. Let me ask you a question. We talked about Ezra and the tribes of Israel being kicked out of the land to Babylon for 70 years. Now think historically. When the 12 tribes of Israel, when the land of Canaan split in half, after Solomon's death, he had a son named Rehoboam, and there was another man named Jeroboam who would take certain tribes in the north, and Rehoboam would keep certain number of tribes in the south. Now here's the question. In 931 BC, this takes place. Israel splits. How many tribes went north and how many stayed south? What'd you say? Gail says 10 went north and 2 stayed in the south. True or false? Gail's right. But if you count the tribes of the south, Benjamin, Judah, and Simeon, how many do you get? 3, not 2. And that has to be explained. The 2 tribes in the south that stayed were Benjamin, who was in control of Jerusalem, and Judah. But Simeon down here is not counted among the tribes that stayed in the south. They are counted with the tribes that went north with Jeroboam. Why is that? Because clearly the Bible says Simeon took her territory from within the tribe, from within the territory of Judah. I want to show you a couple of verses. God prophesied. God prophesied through Simeon's father Jacob in Genesis 49 that Simeon's tribe would be scattered. They would be given a territory, but they would scatter. Look what it says in Genesis chapter 49, verse 5. Remember, this is Jacob, an old man with 12 sons. He's on his deathbed, and Jacob gathers all 12 of his sons to his room. They come into his room, and one by one, Jacob goes around the room and he speaks to each of his sons about their future. He prophesies about his boys. And this is what he says about his 2 sons, Simeon and Levi. He said, Simeon, now we know Levi is set apart by God's grace and mercy as the priests. But what about Simeon? He says, Simeon and Levi are brothers. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce. I could tell you the story of how it was Simeon and Levi who went in and murdered all the men of Shechem. But we don't have time for that. You have to go back into the book of Genesis and find it. They murdered the men of Shechem. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. And there's a circumstance that comes up, or not a circumstance, but there's I'm losing the word. What's the word I'm thinking of? A what? Consequence. That's exactly it. There's a consequence for their anger and their wrath. And this is what God says through Jacob to his son Simeon. I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. This is what God said He was going to do. So He gave them a territory. You see it right there. That is their inherited land. But God said in Genesis 49, I'm going to scatter you. Look at another verse concerning where Simeon went. If Simeon was scattered because God said they would be through Jacob, then where did they go? Look at what the Bible says in 2 Chronicles 15:9. Now here is King Asa, if you want to write it down. He was a good king. And this is what Asa had to say about his territory. He said, he gathered all Judah and Benjamin That's all he labels for the south. He gathered all Judah and Benjamin and those from Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon. What does it say there? Who resided with them. Where did the tribe of Simeon go? The Bible says that the tribe of Simeon, the people of Simeon, went up to live among Ephraim and Manasseh. That's where they went. So King Asa gathers all Judah and Benjamin and also a second group, Ephraim and Manasseh and Simeon, who resided with them, for many defected to him from Israel when they saw that Yahweh his God was with them. That's a whole other story about King Asa. So we see in 2 Chronicles that Simeon had absorbed themselves in the land of Ephraim and Manasseh. They didn't stay where they were supposed to, and that was God's punishment. He said, "Fierce is your anger and your wrath, and you will be scattered throughout Jacob." In 2 Chronicles chapter 34, same book, but further down the list, look what it says. This is talking about a different king, King Josiah, another good king. It says, "Then he burned the bones of the priests on their altars, and he purged Judah and Jerusalem." Period. And then something else he did. "In the cities of Manasseh, Ephraim, and Simeon, even as far as Naphtali, in their surrounding ruins." And he goes on. But I want to show you where Simeon is now attached. Simeon is no longer attached to Judah and Benjamin and Jerusalem. Simeon is now attached to Manasseh and Ephraim. This is what happened if you look at it on a map. Simeon was scattered, the people of Simeon scattered into the territory of Ephraim, and they scattered into the territory of Manasseh. So by the time it came, 931 BC, for when the time came that Israel would split, Simeon was no longer a tribe of the south. They were now a tribe counted among Ephraim and Manasseh. They left their tribal territory. So the only people left in the south were Benjamin and Judah. And that's why you have 10 tribes that go north and 2 tribes that stay south, even though according to Joshua chapter 19, Simeon is down south. Simeon moves. The people of Simeon would move into Ephraim and Manasseh. That's what happened. Let's finish this. Give me 1 minute. I just want you to look down to verse 10. I just want to show you the names of the tribes. That's all. Verse 10, "The third lot came up to the sons of Zebulun." So there's that tribe. Zebulun is counted. They get a territory. Look at verse 16. "This was the inheritance of the sons of Zebulun according to their families, their cities, and their villages." Zebulun is represented. Look at verse 17. "The fourth lot fell to Issachar." So Issachar would get their land. Look at verse 24. "The fifth lot fell to the tribe of the sons of Asher." So they would get their land. Look at verse 32. "The sixth lot fell to the sons of Naphtali." So they would get their tribe, their tribal inheritance. And verse 40 says, "The seventh lot fell to the tribes of the sons of Dan." So all 12 sons of Jacob are represented in these chapters. All of them got their tribal inheritance. And we'll talk about a little more about Dan next time. I've run out of time. But all of the tribes are represented. All 12 tribes got land from Yahweh through the casting of lots of Eleazar the priest, through the administration of Joshua. Every tribe got an allotted land. In case you read something that says certain tribes were left out, no, they weren't. The Bible's very clear. Every name is represented. Every tribe got their lot. So there. Let's close in prayer. Father, thank you for the time you give us.